Think about the last time you checked your bank balance. That number on the screen, the one that goes up when you work and down when you live. Where did it actually come from? Not your paycheck, not the government. Where did the money itself come from? Most people would say, the government prints it, which is partially true, but here is the part that changes everything. The United States government, the most powerful government in human history, does not control the money supply of the United States. A private institution does, one that has never been fully audited, one whose meetings are not open to elected officials, one whose decisions can make your savings worth less overnight, without your knowledge, without your consent, and without any vote being cast. And that is just the first layer, because above that institution, there is another one. Above that, 3 companies that most people have never thought about, but that own a controlling stake in nearly every corporation you have ever bought something from. And above all of it, a system so perfectly designed that it doesn't need enforcement. It runs on your behavior. It was engineered to. By the time this video ends, you will understand exactly who controls your money, where it comes from, who profits from it, and what that means for every financial decision you will ever make. This is not a conspiracy theory. Every institution named in this video is publicly documented. Every figure cited is verifiable. What you are about to watch is simply the truth, assembled in one place for the first time. Part 1. The engineering of wanting. Before we can understand who controls money, we have to understand something that came first. We have to understand who learned to control the people who use it. His name was Edward Bernays. He was the nephew of Sigmund Freud. And in the 1920s, he did something that no one had quite attempted before at scale. He applied the science of the unconscious mind, the science of desire, fear, identity, and belonging, to the selling of products. Now stop and ask yourself something. If you have ever bought something you didn't need, something you justified as a reward or an upgrade, or just because it was on sale, was that your decision? Or was it the decision of a system that spent a century learning exactly how to manufacture that moment in your brain? Before Bernays, companies made things and hoped people would buy them. After Bernays, companies made things and then manufactured the need. He called his method the engineering of consent. Published in 1947, it described, with clinical precision, how to move mass populations towards specific behaviors, not through force, but through the careful arrangement of desire. Now, why does this matter in a documentary about who controls money? Because money has 2 sides. The side that is created, which we will get to, and the side that is spent. If you can engineer what people want to spend money on and how much debt they will willingly carry to get it, then you have solved the hardest problem in economics, not the supply of money, the demand for it. The modern consumer economy is not, at its heart, a system designed to meet human needs. It is a system designed to continuously generate the demand for credit, because credit is how money is created, and money creation is how financial institutions generate wealth. The engineering of wanting is not a side effect of capitalism. It is the engine of the monetary system itself. In 1945, Americans saved roughly 21% of their income. By 2005, that figure had dropped to near zero. Not because people became less responsible, because the system around them was redesigned. Policy by policy, advertisement by advertisement, credit card by credit card, to make saving feel irrational and spending feel natural. The message was the same everywhere. on billboards, on television, in catalogs delivered to your door, in the language of every loan officer, every credit card application, every buy now, pay later button ever designed. You deserve it now. 4 words, responsible for more personal financial destruction than any recession, any market crash, any act of government. 4 words that rewired an entire civilization's relationship with money. And they were written, deliberately, by people who understood that if you spent today, you would borrow tomorrow. And borrowing was the point all along. And here's the part that matters. Every dollar spent on credit, every car loan, every department store card, every home equity line was a dollar that a bank created from nothing and on which it earned interest. The engineering of wanting fed the engine of money creation. And who controls that engine? That requires going back much further than a department store. It requires going to a desert. Part 2. The Oil Covenant. In the summer of 1971, the United States had a problem. The country was running significant trade deficits. Its gold reserves were dwindling, and foreign governments were beginning to demand that their dollar holdings be converted back to gold as they were entitled to do under the Bretton Woods system. President Nixon had a choice: reform the spending or change the rules. He changed the rules. On August 15, 1971, the United States unilaterally ended the dollar's convertibility to gold. The Bretton Woods system, which had governed global monetary order since 1944, collapsed in 9 minutes of broadcast time. The dollar was now backed by nothing tangible, which raised an immediate existential question for the global economy. If the dollar isn't backed by gold, why should the world continue to use it as its reserve currency? Why should every nation on earth hold dollars, trust dollars, trade in dollars? The answer came from a desert. In June of 1974, Secretary of State Henry Kissinger sat across from Crown Prince Fahd of Saudi Arabia and signed an agreement that was kept classified for more than 40 years. The details were not made public until 2016. The arrangement was elegant in its architecture. Saudi Arabia, and through its leadership of OPEC, the broader oil-producing world, would price its oil exclusively in US dollars. Every nation on earth that needed oil, which was every nation on earth, would therefore need to hold dollar reserves. Not because the dollar was backed by something real, but because oil was. And oil was priced in dollars. Let's be very clear about what just happened. In 1974, the most powerful country in the world made a deal with one kingdom in the desert that made every other country on earth permanently dependent on a currency it does not control to access an energy source it cannot live without. This is not ancient history. Every time you fill up your tank, every time your electricity bill arrives, every time a product you ordered crosses an ocean, that transaction happens in the shadow of a deal signed in secret 50 years ago that no citizen of any country ever voted for. In return, the United States pledged military protection for the Saudi kingdom and its oil fields. The dollar was no longer backed by gold. It was backed by oil, and oil was backed by American military power. By 1975, every OPEC member had adopted dollar-only pricing. The petrodollar system was complete, and with it, the United States had accomplished something no empire in history had quite managed. It had made the entire world structurally dependent on its currency, simply in order to keep their lights on. This has allowed the United States to run trade and fiscal deficits that would have triggered currency crises in any other nation. The economist Barry Eichengreen described this as America's exorbitant privilege, the ability to borrow in its own currency at low interest from the rest of the world, because the rest of the world has no choice but to use that currency. And nations that sought to break from the system, history has an answer for that too. But the answer requires looking at specific dates in sequence. Saddam Hussein announced Iraq would sell oil in euros in September 2000. The invasion of Iraq began in March 2003. Muammar Gaddafi proposed a gold-backed African currency in 2009. By 2011, he was dead and his country was in ruins. We are not drawing conclusions here. We are presenting a sequence of documented events in order and allowing you the intelligence to observe the pattern. What you do with that observation is entirely your own. Part 3. The Global Referee. In 1983, Ghana was broke. Not broke the way a person is broke, paycheck to paycheck, behind on rent. Broke the way a country is broke. Inflation above 100%. Hospitals with no medicine. Schools with no books. A currency that couldn't buy what it promised. The government turned to the only institution willing to help. The International Monetary Fund arrived with a rescue package. What it asked for in return transformed Ghana, and not entirely in the ways Ghanaians wanted. There are two institutions that govern the financial lives of most nations on Earth. They are not elected. They are not accountable to any single government. The International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. Both were created at the Bretton Woods Conference in 1944. Both were designed in their official mandate to promote global economic stability and development. Both have a voting structure in which the United States holds the only mandatory veto over major decisions. When a developing nation faces a financial crisis, when its currency collapses or its debt becomes unserviceable, the IMF arrives with what it calls a rescue package. The money comes with conditions. Those conditions are called structural adjustment programs. And the conditions, across decades and dozens of countries, have followed a remarkably consistent pattern. Privatize state industries, cut public spending on healthcare, education, subsidies, liberalize capital flows, deregulate financial markets, and repay the debt in dollars. Think about what that list actually means when it lands on a real country. Privatize state industries. The water company is sold. A foreign corporation now decides your water bill. Cut public spending. The hospital closes a ward. A mother decides whether to borrow money to treat her child. Liberalize capital flows. International money can now leave your country faster than it arrived. These are not abstract policy positions. These are the specific conditions that the IMF has attached, repeatedly, consistently, across 40 years and dozens of countries, to loans that those countries had no choice but to accept. Each of these countries, in their moment of crisis, accepted conditions that transferred significant economic decision-making from their own governments to the terms of an externally negotiated loan agreement. Joseph Stiglitz, Nobel Prize-winning economist and former chief economist of the World Bank, resigned in 1999 in part over his objections to exactly this pattern. He later wrote, "These problems are not the result of natural disasters or the inherent failures of developing countries. They reflect failures of the international economic system." This is not a fringe view. It is a documented critique from inside the institution itself. Here is the larger picture that emerges. The petrodollar system ensures global demand for US dollars. The IMF and World Bank ensure that when nations face crises, the resolution involves more dollar-denominated debt and economic reforms that align those nations more closely with the international financial system, centered on the dollar, and the commercial banks create money through lending, earning interest on every new debt obligation they generate. None of these things in isolation is a conspiracy. Each has a documented, rational, institutional logic. Each was built by real people with stated goals, many of which were genuinely benevolent. But the combined effect, the emergent property of all three systems operating together, is a global architecture in which monetary dependency is the default state of most nations and most individuals. And that architecture is now evolving into something that makes the petrodollar look almost quaint. Part 4. The Programmable Future. In 1971, Richard Nixon took money off the gold standard. In 1974, Henry Kissinger put it on an oil standard. What is happening right now, quietly, in central bank research departments and government working groups across 134 countries, may be the third transformation. It is called the Central Bank Digital Currency, the CBDC. According to a 2024 survey by the Bank for International Settlements, 94% of the world's central banks are now actively developing one. China's digital yuan pilot has already processed nearly $1 trillion in transactions. The European Central Bank is in preparation phase for a digital euro. India's digital rupee is live and expanding. And here is where the story becomes something new, something that has no historical precedent. Because unlike physical cash, unlike even digital bank balances as we know them today, a central bank digital currency can be programmed. Programmable money means money that carries rules embedded within it. Rules about what it can be spent on. Rules about when it expires. Rules about who can receive it. Rules about where it can travel. In theory, this is presented as a solution to problems. Stimulus payments that can only be spent at local businesses, benefits that can't be used on restricted categories, efficiency, inclusion. These are real arguments made by serious people. But the technology does not only enable those applications, it enables their inverse. Here is the question you should be sitting with right now. If your government decided tomorrow that you could no longer spend money on something it had deemed irresponsible, a political donation, a firearm, certain foods, certain media, with physical cash, there is no mechanism to enforce that. You hand over the bill. The transaction happens. No record, no flag, no restriction. With a programmable central bank digital currency, the transaction simply does not occur. No arrest, no fine, no confrontation, just silence. A digital zero where your purchase used to be. In 2025, the United States House of Representatives passed a bill called the Anti-CBDC Surveillance State Act, specifically because enough lawmakers recognized that programmable digital currency creates a surveillance and control capacity that physical cash never permitted. The bill's very name reflects the concern. Physical cash has one property that is, in the history of money, almost unique. It is anonymous. A $20 bill moves between hands with no record, no trace, no oversight. The political philosopher Hannah Arendt once observed that totalitarian regimes require total visibility into the behavior of their subjects. She was speaking about ideology, but the principle applies to finance with equal force. A population whose every financial transaction is visible, logged, and potentially restricted, is a population whose economic behavior can be managed, not with tanks, with code. In 2022, during economic disruptions, the city of Shenzhen distributed digital yuan stimulus payments to residents. Those payments had an expiration date. spend within 30 days, or lose the value. The behavioral outcome was exactly as designed: immediate, targeted, measurable consumer spending. This is monetary policy with a precision that no previous system has ever permitted, not the blunt instrument of interest rate adjustments that take 18 months to filter through an economy, but a direct, programmable instruction embedded in the currency itself. The question is not whether this technology is powerful. It clearly is. The question is who holds the authority to write the rules, and what happens when the rules are written for the benefit of the system rather than the individuals within it. Part 5. The Informed Individual. Let's step back from the architecture, from the petrodollars and the programmable currencies and the structural adjustment programs, and ask the question that actually matters to the person watching this. What do I do with all of this? Because here is what nobody tells you after a video like this. Most people will watch what you just watched, feel the weight of it, and use it as a reason to feel powerless. The system is rigged. The game is fixed. What's the point? That response is understandable. It is also, and I say this with respect, exactly what the system needs you to feel. A population that believes it is powerless does not organize, does not build, does not accumulate, does not ask inconvenient questions. It simply participates on the system's terms forever. You do not have to do that. Here is what the history of money teaches when you read it without ideology. Every era of monetary control has produced within it individuals and institutions that understood the system well enough to build significant wealth and freedom despite its constraints, and sometimes precisely because of them. Now, these are not moral examples. The methods of both those empires involved their own forms of power and exploitation. The point is not the method. The point is the pattern. In every monetary era, the people who understood the architecture of money had an asymmetric advantage over those who did not. Understanding that money is manufactured, that consumer desire is engineered, does not mean you stop participating in the economy. It means you participate differently. You become aware of the psychological infrastructure designed to separate you from your money. And awareness, genuine, specific, documented awareness, is the beginning of resistance. Understanding the petrodollar system, that the dollar's dominance is structural, not natural, tells you something actionable about currency risk, about the importance of assets that exist outside the dollar system, about why gold and diversified global assets have historically served as monetary hedges. Understanding programmable money, the CBDC trajectory, tells you something about what financial sovereignty means going forward, about why the capacity to transact privately in assets that cannot be frozen, restricted, or expired is not a paranoid preference. It is a studied position. An understanding that every significant financial institution, from the Federal Reserve to the BIS to the asset management oligopoly, was built by human beings for specific purposes in specific historical moments, means that none of it is permanent. None of it is natural law. All of it was designed. And what was designed by some human beings in some historical moment can be understood, navigated, and in some cases transcended by any human being who chooses to do the work. The question of who controls all of our money doesn't have one answer. It has layers. And the person who can see all the layers, who understands the engineering of desire, the architecture of oil, the conditionality of debt, and the implications of programmable currency, that person is not controlled by the system in the way that someone who cannot see it is. The people who built this system understood something that most financial education refuses to teach. That knowledge is not neutral. Every person who understands how money is actually created is one fewer person who can be managed by debt. Every person who understands the petrodollar system is one fewer person who misreads currency risk. Every person who understands what a CBDC actually enables is one fewer person who will sleepwalk into surrendering the last form of anonymous financial freedom they have. Knowledge in this specific domain is not abstract. It is the difference between being a participant in the system and being consumed by it, not free from it. No one is free from it entirely, but different within it, more deliberate, more sovereign, more difficult to manage. What you've just watched took years of documented history, verified economics, and attributed research to build. This channel exists because financial education, real financial education, is not taught in the places it matters most. If something in this changed how you see the world, that was the point. Every week, we go a layer deeper. Like and subscribe, and share this with someone who is ready to see it.